Hello, my name is Paul Naybour. Welcome to another Parallel Project Training podcast. Today we're going to do the PPQ, and joining me is Tom O'Shea. Hello, Tom.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we're up to change control, quite an important project management process, and we've got 4 assessment criteria under change control. So we're going to work through each of those in turn and discuss what they mean and how they're relevant to project managers. So let's just look at the first one, shall we, Tom?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so it's critically evaluate the benefits and features which support the implementation and maintenance of effective change control process. So I expect we better start off by talking about do you want to do the benefits first?
Well, before going into the benefits and features, one thing I would say about this particular criterion is that as a candidate, you need to be thinking more generally about change control and why you do it. So if I asked somebody at this sort of level to tell me what a change control process is, they can give me the 4 or 5 steps that you would go through. This particular criterion is saying, well, hang on a second, just take a step back. Why do you actually do this? So what are the benefits of doing change control? And what are the features that change control contains that would enable you to get those benefits?
Yeah.
So you can say, well, one thing that change control does is give you the ability to track what's happened throughout the process. And we do that by having things like a log and request forms. So the feature is having an element of change control in place, such as the log. And then that enables the organization to be able to understand where the changes are at any particular point. Stakeholders know how their change is progressing. You can keep a record of what happened in terms of change control, how it was evaluated, what the factors were that were evaluated, and what the decision was. And then for purposes of audit and lessons learned, we've got a full record of everything that happened in relation to a change.
Yeah. So it's part of the overall governance process for the project.
Yes, exactly.
It supports transparency and visibility of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is one of those criteria where what you're trying to do is almost set up the case for introducing change control, because in the case study, it's unlikely that there's going to be some kind of effective change control process already in place.
That's one of the challenges in many project teams, isn't it? The one you get the biggest pushback often is change control.
Yeah, or if you're coming from an organization where you have something established already and it's just part of what you do, then you need to think about how you're going to get this organization to adopt this process. They've gone along already so far for a number of projects and probably years without having any kind of control like this in place. So what we're looking to do is sell the reason for doing it.
Do you think it increases the chances of project success? Do you think change control is going to give you better control of cost and time and quality?
Absolutely. Yeah, because without change control, changes can be made left, right, and centre by anyone who just happens to think that there's some improvement here that would be beneficial. And if you look at the case study, you should be able to find a number of examples where changes have happened that have clearly not gone through any kind of governance process. And that further supports the reason why change control needs to be formally introduced in the organisation. And if you look at what's happened as a result of those changes that haven't been properly controlled, that's further evidence that backs up your rationale or reasons for introducing features which then provide those benefits.
Yeah, so that demonstrates why those benefits are tangible in the case study, does it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we got it's part of governance, it's about transparency and visibility, it's improved success. Are there any other key benefits that you think of effective change control?
Well, again, it depends on which element of the change control process you're looking at. So, for example, another feature of change control is having designated authority levels for approving changes.
Yeah.
So the PM could be given the authority to sanction small changes up to a certain value or that don't significantly impact the end product. The sponsor could be or should typically have the authority to make changes overall in the project, but this project is part of a program, in the case study. So therefore, maybe there needs to be some kind of change control board at program level.
Yeah.
But by having a designated authority, it firstly ensures that decisions are made at the right level and doesn't waste time escalating decisions to a high level that could be made simply and easily by the PM.
Yeah, that links to some of the other topics where sort of that clearly defined delegated authorities are in place and clear rules.
Yes.
You're doing an interesting thing, actually. You're linking the features to the benefits. So you're saying having a change log is a feature, and that gives you the benefit of visibility. Having a clearly defined approval process is a feature, and that gives you a benefit in terms of, clarity about who should take what decisions. It's quite an interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
So another feature might be that you do a detailed evaluation of the cost impact. So what would be the benefit of that? Sit down and doing a detailed review of the costs before you evaluate the benefit.
As it would be with any particular element that you're going to look at the impact on. So the obvious other one is time. But if you're looking specifically at the impact that a change might have in terms of cost, you're going to be looking at the cost of doing the change, the cost of not doing the change potentially. You're going to look at the time or the cost required to evaluate the change, because that's something that sometimes is overlooked, is if I need to get people to investigate this change, how long is it going to take and what are they not doing whilst we're evaluating the change?
Yeah.
So in terms of controlling costs, if some kind of formal structured change control process or evaluation in particular is key, because without it, your costs can spiral out of control, or you might actually miss a change that could help to reduce costs if the change isn't properly considered. It might appear at face value to be something that is going to be too burdensome on the project to carry out, but actually might have some benefit that perhaps isn't fully understood until you do that evaluation.
Yeah, not all changes are increases in costs, are they? Sometimes a change might be more cost effective.
Absolutely, yeah.
I have known that,
Yeah.
The one thing, when it says maintenance of an effective change control process, what do we mean by maintaining the change control process?
Just ensuring that it remains fit for purpose, in effect, and aligned to what the project and the organisation needs in terms of governance and control. So, from time to time, it might be that we need to alter the authority levels because of the stage that a project is at, or we might need to apply tighter change control or looser change control because, again, the stage a project is at or the particular products that are being considered. So we can adapt and modify the process to ensure it's suitable for the circumstances at that time in the project. You don't want to be changing it on a very frequent basis because people won't understand, stakeholders won't understand where things are and what's meant to be done at this particular point. But from time to time, as part of an ongoing lessons learned through the project, you ought to be taking a step back and just saying, is our change control process working effectively? Should we be modifying the process? The benefit is that we ensure that we keep it up to date and relevant and don't waste time and effort.
Yeah. I mean, especially when it goes from like a change from sort of concept, design development into sort of like implementation stage, you're going to get more people involved. There are going to be more changes. It's going to be a bigger project.
Yeah.
Good.
And you might think about things like change freezes when you get to a certain point as well. So that's another feature of change control is that you can build in specific.
A change freeze was like a snowball in the summer. It was good in concept, but didn't last very long.
Yeah. I've heard of it being applied far too rigorously, and things have been built that they knew were not going to work, but couldn't be changed because there was change freeze. Yeah. So they had to go back and modify it afterwards, which just took longer and cost more.
Oh, good. That's really useful. So let's move on to the next one. This is 3.2 in the syllabus. Critically evaluate ways in which to capture, record, and review proposed options for change to determine the impact on project scope and objectives. Now, I think this is quite an interesting one because it's review proposed options for change, isn't it?
Yes. So the key thing with this is about capturing, recording, and reviewing those options. So we need some kind of structured approach to the way that the changes are going to be recorded within the organisation. Now, again, I would expect that most candidates coming forward for the PPQ will come from a background where there is some kind of formal process in place. But you're going into an organisation in the case study where they don't have anything like that. So what you have to do is think about, well, what kind of options could I have for capturing, recording and reviewing changes that come forward? So it's really looking into the practicalities of the change control process.
Yeah.
So, for example, am I going to be using a simple Excel spreadsheet and I'll manage it all myself and I'll just keep a track of what's going on? Or do I want to do something a bit more elaborate, maybe something that gets shared on Teams or SharePoint, which others can see and contribute to, and is try to sort of roll this out almost at program level over a period of time. Start clearly with your own project, but maybe over time this is the sort of thing that could be adopted by the program overall.
Yeah, I was working with a really large infrastructure project, and they had a whole head of IT was in the course with me, and they were telling me about their whole change control system, their enterprise-based change control system, which was a specific system that it controlled drawings and documents, and it was a whole IT process around the way they reviewed and approved changes. Safety, especially in safety critical systems, because it links to configuration, design change. So we've got options here, don't we? That's a really sort of simple approach or a more sophisticated approach, and it's matching the complexity of the project, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the complexity of the project and also the circumstances in the project in the case study. So at this point in time in the project, would it be appropriate to introduce some kind of formal structured system? Yeah. Or is it better just to, in effect, muddle along with something simple and straightforward like an Excel spreadsheet, and then maybe for the next project introduce something a bit more sophisticated? Yeah. So that depends on the stage of project is at, the criticality of the timing in the project, the experience of the people that are working in your team in the case study.
I just want to test, when it says proposed options for change, is that referring to not just identifying there's a change, but looking at the different options for how we could address that change? Like the do nothing option, or doing it now or deferring it. Is it looking at the not just capturing the change, but actually having evaluated the change, which options should we consider and review and propose to the governance arrangements that we're making?
Yes, so this is where you need to be thinking about that third part of the process as given in the criterion. So we've talked about capture and record the change. So we capture it in a change request form or what have you, and record it in a change log. Maybe you go straight to a change log if it's a simple process. Yeah. But then the other part of it is reviewing those changes. Yeah. And looking at the options, the way forward. And in terms of options, we absolutely have to consider do the change and not do it. But within doing the change, it might be that there are other ways of achieving the outcome the stakeholder's looking for. Yeah. There could be different ways to implement this of a very basic, we could do a quick and easy solution, or we could do something that's a full-blown implementation. Maybe the quick and easy will get to half or 2/3 of what the stakeholder's looking for, but it's minimal impact. But another option is to go the full-blown change, and that will take longer, but maybe have more benefit. So we need to consider how we're going to control that review process. Again, is it something that the project manager is just going to sit down with the stakeholder and discuss what they're looking for and think about the options that could be implemented to achieve that? Or do we need to think about setting up some kind of workshops where we're going to have some subject matter experts, maybe even turn it into a formal change control board? Yeah. There could be times when it's necessary to get some third-party experts from outside, some consultants or whatever, to advise, particularly if it's something safety critical, for example, or regulatory in some way. If those areas are affected, maybe you need external expertise to come in and guide you.
Yeah, quite often people will pull in a cost engineer or an expert on costing options to advise them on the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that ties back into part of that evaluation process, which is how much did that cost?
Yes, that's right.
Who's funding that?
So 2 more left. Critically evaluate why and how to implement and manage approved changes. This confuses people because they read this as being the whole process, don't they? That, in my experience. So what does this mean from your perspective?
It's fairly straightforward and simple, and it's pretty much what it says. You've had a change that you've recommended, the sponsor has approved or whoever, and now you're going to have to implement it. So what do you have to do? So you have to ensure that you have the right people in place to carry out the change, that they have the right authority and resources, be that money or time or equipment or materials or whatever, that they understand the brief so that they've been told what the change is and what the outcome is. So they understand everything about it to be able to implement it.
Yeah.
The other part of it is if you're going to be implementing changes, it's likely that other documentation will have changed as well. So maybe your project plan's changed. Maybe your risk register's been affected. If you've got configuration management of some kind in place, then you need to update the records for the products that have been impacted.
Yeah. You're probably going to have to rebaseline your project management plan.
Yeah, all of that. So you have to think about all of those things that need to happen to be able to, as it says in the criterion, implement the change. Now, the other part of it then is manage the approved changes in a project, and that's about getting updates, feedback from the person or team that are doing the changes. So where are they, depending on how long the change is going to take. If it's going to take place over a period of days or weeks, it might be that you need some regular updates on progress that they're making in relation to that specific change.
Yeah.
So
I think this can be quite a challenging bit. I've certainly seen it all collapse at this point, especially if you've got multiple changes going on. If you've got a very dynamic situation where there's a lot of changes going on, it sounds really easy, let's just change something. But actually, the communication of that change, especially when there might be several changes in a month, can be very confusing for team members. So it actually needs careful consideration.
And if you've got several changes going on, you need to be keeping track of all of those different changes so that you ensure that they all complement each other or marry together efficiently, and all the stakeholders understand where the project overall is, because different things are happening now to what was originally described and what their expectations are.
Briefly, when it says critically evaluate, it implies sort of 2 approaches to doing that.
Yeah. So, this is, again, it's a good point to bring up, because it can cause confusion that you think, well, this is an either or, do I tell the people or do I just document it? In this instance, like in a number of other criteria, it's not an either or, it's which is the priority.
Yeah, okay.
So is it more important in this project to ensure that people are properly briefed and understood what's happening, what's expected of them, and I will focus on doing that first and get that underway? Or should I, because of the nature of the project and the kind of thing that we're working on at the moment, is it more important that we actually properly understand all the plans and all of the impacts on all the documentation first, and then I'll brief people after? So don't see it as a binary, black and white, do one or the other. It's which one do I do first? Which am I going to prioritise? Yeah.
And with all these critical evaluate, I think you can think of project managers as people, processes and products.
Yeah.
So they always involve, I've got to tell people, inform people what's going on. I've got a process to follow, so I have to rebaseline the plan.
Yeah.
And then products, I might have to change the specifications of some of the products I'm creating. So there are different ways in which you can, if you just follow the process, you just send out emails to everybody saying the plan has changed, they're probably not going to even register.
Yeah.
But if you just communicate to people, they're going to go, well, where's the paperwork?
Yes. Yeah.
So you always have got that people or process choice,
Yeah. Now, just as an aside to this, in terms of the PPQ itself, One thing that the candidate you need to be careful of is that you don't just simply say, oh, well, I'll do both.
Yes.
Because evaluate is looking for a recommendation.
Yeah.
So you must prioritize. You must say, this is going to be my focus.
Yeah.
Okay. If you say, I'll do both to the assessors, that's not giving a recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it is important that you do ensure that you set out a priority. And it might be that given the nature of the project and the tight time you're working against, the documentation side of things could be, it's not exactly something you would not do, but it would be the lowest priority because the project management plan that's in place already is pretty poor.
Yeah.
So, updating a poor plan is going to take even more time.
Yeah. And if you can get everybody in the same room and brief them, then the documentation is less important. Which if you've got hundreds of people on your project, then the documentation is a bigger priority, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
So it's a matter of, again, the complexity, size and scale of the project leads you to the right approach. So the final one, critically why and how a trend analysis is used to add value to the management of a project and inform learning and knowledge management.
Yes. Now, this is one that causes a lot of confusion, because when you read that criterion, it's pretty obvious. It's trend analysis. It's what we do in a project just to see how things are going, how much am I spending, what we're doing in terms of the progress, etc. What you need to bear in mind with this is the section it's in. It's in change control, and the criterion, unfortunately, doesn't make it clear that this is expecting you to talk about trends in terms of changes.
Yeah. If you were asking that in an assessment, you'd say, in terms of change control, could you describe the trend analysis, would you? Because it's repeated further down in the syllabus, isn't it, in terms of project reporting?
Yeah, there is a section on project reporting where we talk about, looking at the way that information is used to keep up to date, etc., implying trend analysis. The term trend analysis isn't actually used anywhere else. It's only used here, but it's suggested or implied in the reporting area. Mm-hmm. Within the assessment, at the start of each of the oral questions, as we've mentioned previously, the assessors will tell you what the learning outcome is. So they tell you that the learning outcome is change control, effectively. So you do know what the theme of the questions are, and you've already had 2 questions on change control. Yeah, they don't always do the questions in numeric order, but it's highly likely that this question would be the last question to be asked. Yeah. So you've probably had 2 questions on change control already, and then this could be the 3rd question.
Yeah. So here we're looking at trends within the change control process.
Yeah.
Like how many new changes have we opened this month compared to the number of changes we managed to close out?
Yes. Yeah. So we could have a look at things on sort of a global level, if you like. So how many changes have we had this month? How many changes are remaining open? Yeah. What's the trend in terms of time it takes to close changes? Yeah. From proposal through to final decision or recommendation.
Yeah. Cumulative impact of the change on the project budget?
Yeah, so other things that you could look at trending are, what are the impacts of the cost of changes on the project budget overall? Yeah. So, we started with a budget of X and we've implemented, 3 or 4 or 5 changes, and now our project budget has grown by Y amount. Okay, so what's the impact in terms of the cost of doing changes compared to the overall budget, but also to the benefits? Yeah. So it might be that
the impact on time as well. Yeah, it's certainly easier to work out as you're going along rather than trying to retrospectively figure out what was the impact of change.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just waiting until lessons learned and saying, well, why were we late? Well, it's because of all those changes. Well, perhaps if you'd stopped a third or halfway through the project and looked at the impact of changes and realised that these changes are all causing you to be later and later and later, then maybe you could have done something earlier on to bring that under control.
And how's that linked to knowledge and learning?
Partly for improving the process. So if you're finding, for example, that the trend in time it's taking to evaluate and close change requests is having a significant impact, then can we improve the process? Can we speed it up in some way by altering the authority levels or by meeting more frequently to review and discuss changes?
Yeah.
But you can also use it as part of lessons learned in future projects. So we can have a look at, well, why do we keep getting lessons in that particular area? Was there a stakeholder group that wasn't engaged properly? Were there requirements that weren't clear? Were there technical problems that we encountered that we could have anticipated? Was our estimating poor?
Yeah.
Why have all these changes happened? So what can we learn for the future to be able to ensure?
Lessons learned.
Absolutely, yeah. Future knowledge.
Yeah, especially if you see that trend across multiple projects,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Good. I think the challenge with these is when you initially look at these criteria, they all read quite similar. And I think what you've done is really useful to actually drill into each one and differentiate each one clearly, because I think people find that they tend to find it quite difficult to describe the different components of change control, the different aspects and perspectives on change control. So
yeah. So in summary, the four of them are: firstly, 3.1. What do you put into a change control process, and why do you have that? Second one is, how are you going to set it up to capture and record and review those changes? The third one is, you've got a change that's been approved. How are you going to implement and control it? And the fourth one is taking a bit of a step back and saying, well, have a look at the process and how it's working, and is there anything you can learn from what's going on in terms of changes?
very good. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.